Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
In the apophthegmata, which is the collection of the sayings of the desert fathers, which the fathers would gradually begin to put in these collections for the others to read, the greatest place among them is Poemen, which people don't often know that. But well over 200 of the sayings and anecdotes are about St. Poemen the Great. A little bit later than Anthony, related somewhat to Paisios and some of the other great desert fathers. Poemen has over 200 sayings in there. It's quite prolific. And they're very balanced, and I would encourage any of you to read the Desert Fathers. You can't read the Desert Fathers as isolated texts, though. You need to read them as a whole and in a context, because it's very easy to pick and choose in so-called proof text, as many people try to do with the scriptures. You don't want to do that with them, because all the sayings can relate to us, but you can take one thing and go to extremes, or something and go to too lower a level. But Poemen was a father of great moderation. By the way, Poemen means shepherd. That's all the name means, and that's really what he was. He was a shepherd of the people. Poemen is a young monk, goes up to the desert, and he lived very, very far away from an Abba, a great elder. And he had 3 questions that he wanted to ask this elder. So he walked a great distance in the desert. Of course, I think the conditions are not quite like walking around here, even though today might be similar with the heat. But he walked, and he gets there, and he asks him the 2 questions he had for his spiritual life, and he can't remember the third. So he walks all the way back, and when he gets to his door to open it, he remembers the 3rd question. So he turns around and goes to the abbot's cell, a long way back in the desert, and asks him the 3rd question. And this abbot is greatly amazed with Poemen and said, "You will be great and be a shepherd of many, of a great flock." Because he had such zeal for the spiritual life and for those kind of questions, the great efforts he would make to find out answers from his spiritual father on the matters of spiritual life were vital to him, much as they are worldly things can become for us. We'd use him as an example in that, and that he cared about the one thing needful more than anything. He also was known for his moderation. Yes, he at first fasted very, very greatly. He didn't eat for days and didn't drink for days on end, and then he would eat. But after a while, he determined that he would just eat something simple every day, probably once a day, knowing the practice of the time. And he'd do it every day, just so he wouldn't, damage his body, but that he also would keep a good place of humility in the middle. It's exactly what St. Joseph the Hezekiah did in modern times when he went to Mount Athos. At first he fasted for days on end, and he decided that every day of the year, no matter what, he and his co-struggler would eat once a day. And what that ended up doing is, now you think about that, it can sound austere, or it might not sound as austere as some of the fathers, like St. Anthony, for example. What it did was, even on Pascha, he ate once a day. And that would seem extreme to us, but other days, big fast days, it might seem kind of normal. So he just kept a great moderation. There wasn't this sort of binge and purge mentality that we can get into with feasts and fasts. He had, even when he ate foods that were non-fasting, it was with great moderation and control. It's a wise man. One day, a monk saw him washing his feet and was scandalized that a desert father was washing his feet. And he said, a line that we all know is that we are called to kill the passions and not the body. The passions of the body, but not the body itself. So you maintain the body and give it enough strength to fight the passions, but don't crush it. It's a wise thing. There's another famous story. This will be the last one I give you today. There's many, many, many stories of Poemen. I encourage you to look them up. But a monk comes to see Poemen. Once again, a great, great journey. And he has many things he wants to ask him about. He gets there and he bows down before Poemen and he says that he wants to talk to him about the kingdom of heaven. Poemen doesn't say anything to him. Not one word does he say to him. So much that he's offended by this at some point. He just leaves and walks away. Well, he gets out into the desert, and just like we all would do, he starts huffing and puffing to himself, and how dare he? I walked all this way to ask him a question, and he won't even talk to me. Thought he was a terribly rude man, so he go back to correct him. And he went and told him, I came here to talk to you about the kingdom of heaven, and you don't even speak to me. Poemen looks up and he says, if you come here to talk to me about the kingdom of heaven, I have nothing to talk to you about. But if you come to talk to me about the passions, open your heart and I will fill it with every manner of good thing. Poemen had the right approach. He was very, very, very humble. He didn't try to talk about deification and theosis and higher things like that. He tried to talk about where most of us actually are and where most of the fathers considered themselves and struggling with their own passions and temptations. Because when we can conquer those with humility, or well, better said, when God conquers those because we do humble ourselves, then we can see the kingdom of heaven, but not before that. So it was in right order. St. Poemen truly was a shepherd of souls, and he had attained to these beatitudes that we sang, or we read just recently, a few seconds ago, for him. That is the kind of person we should try to be, one with great moderation, with great humility, and one that is looking diligently always for every manner of spiritual good thing. St. Poemen, pray to God for us.
Amen.